Hey, I'm curious. Did anybody subscribe to the Axis Culture Translator? Okay. Well, I highly recommend the Culture Translator. I mean, you do it. You can go and just take it as you see fit. But there was a couple things I wanted to point out and discuss for a minute, just from recent happenings or studies that were coming out pertaining to Gen Z. Um, so here, this is the title of this. So again, Culture Translator, they give you three things, important things from the news or the news cycle or some study that came out, and then they kind of talk about those things. And then they pick one of those and they help you to have a conversation with that about somebody in this world. And this is the one this week. So here's this week's: is a new study published in the Journal of Pediatrics suggests that fewer opportunities for independent activity could be contributing to the overall decline in teen mental health. So they give you a link to the study. Again, I encourage you to go look at it. But here's why it's a countercultural narrative. The study's authors noted that several factors that may contribute to less time for today's children and teenagers to engage in what's called self-managed activity. Previously normalized behaviors such as climbing trees and roaming through the neighborhood have been culturally reframed as risky. And well-intentioned parents have aimed to maximize the amount of guided instruction and adult supervision in their children's lives. So what they're saying is what we would have grown up doing now is considered to be risky behavior. And again, as well-intentioned parents have seen to remove these opportunities. They want to put more structure. Free play has been shown to have direct correlation to children's happiness, and without it, it's hard for kids to establish trust in their own abilities to navigate the world outside a closely controlled environment. If you'll think back to the very first week we had in here, I think JP was teaching that. The encouragement there was to move the bubble wrap from real life spaces to digital spaces. You see this playing out in real life, or what are the implications? So what we've done effectively is we give them the access to the Wild West and put it in their pocket, but then we have put too many boundaries in their real life interactions. Let me just ask: do you see this playing out? Do you see this? I'm curious if for those of you that work with people, Gen Z, do you see this kind of in their interactions with you in the workplace? And I definitely do. One of the guys I like to read a lot that even speaks to a lot of this stuff is named Jonathan Haidt. He's not a believer. I think he's a cultural Jew or secular Jew, but he speaks to this a lot. And some of the stuff that he puts out, I think the website or the organization is called Free Range Kids. Anybody heard of this? Free Range Kids. It's a cool thing, I guess. But their encouragement is send your kids out. Because here's what the problem, though, is you fear as a parent, which I'm be sympathetic towards. I mean, we live out at camp, and it's kind of the expectations that your kids are roaming, with the deer or whatever. But in a neighborhood, if you send your kids out to go do whatever, what is the thing you fear most? I don't believe any of that. I think it's what other parents will say. Right? That is the thing that you probably convince yourself of. It's like, oh yeah, it is that they would get snatched. But if your kid's 3 blocks away or 3 streets over or whatever, and you probably get a phone call from another parent say, did you know that your kid is here or whatever? And you're like, yeah, does no one love this child? Yeah. I mean that. Jonathan Haidt, Haidt. Yeah, he's excellent. I recommend basically everything he does. He's not a believer. You got to understand this is to come from a different perspective, but He's putting out some great stuff. Somebody else was saying something.
I was gonna say I don't even let my kid get in the car by himself at Kroger because I'm like, just stay by my side because if
Yeah,
you go to the other side and I can't see you, you're gonna get snagged.
you absolutely 100% being kidnapped. That's right.
Like
Yeah,
it's silly, but it's like that's anxiety. Like
yeah,
plaguing, like not even allowing my kid to be out of my sight for 2 seconds
yeah,
because I think that the work. I think the worst.
yeah, yeah. It is. I mean, well, that's the impression. Yeah,
I was
Alan.
gonna say you've probably seen like in some areas, like not just like what other people think, but actually other people calling to report kids that are at a playground
Yeah,
unattended, reporting it as a neglect. Like 10 and
Neglect,
12-year-old
yeah.
kids, where you're like, they're down the street playing. People are like, no, that's not okay.
yeah.
Whereas
Well,
I mean, most of us in our generation, like my parents had no idea where I was
yeah,
90% of the time.
yeah. That's right. I mean, we lived in Lexington. I ride my bike. I was like 9 years old. I ride my bike 3 miles away to Henry Clay's home.
Yeah.
And ride around there and buy stuff from their little snack shack or whatever. Um, yeah, but now and what's funny is part of this free range kid organization. They give you these printable cards that you can give to your kids. So when somebody approaches your child and says, "Hey, where are your parents?" There's a card that they give them and say, "I'm a free range kid. My parents know exactly where I am." Yeah. It's they know where I am. I've been trained what to do if I see something wrong or if I get hurt. This is what I'll do. I know how to handle this. Thank you for your concern. I think it's pretty cool. Now, you know, anyway, there's lots of complicated things, but what we're seeing is when there's too much structure in the wrong areas, it's not helpful to kids. It's hurtful to them. But again, this is what we're up against. They need to feel they can deal effectively with the real world, not just the world of school. That was a quote from this study. So again, I encourage you to read this because then they take a deep dive. They take a deep dive into this and how to have conversations with your kids about this. And it's like, hey, one of the questions is, how do you feel? What is it that you feel like you need less help with? What is it that we're doing together that you feel like you can handle without my direct supervision? Now they might feel like, oh yeah, I feel like I can handle my phone without you better. Uh, that's a punch them directly in the face. Just no. Anyway, you obviously need to navigate that as is appropriate, but it's good. And then one more I wanted to point out: the word "please." Has anyone heard about this? Read this week. The word "please" has officially taken on a passive-aggressive connotation in conversation, according to linguistics experts. So, "please" is not what we once understood it to be. It is considered passive-aggressive. So, an article in the Atlantic demonstrates the word "please" was originally derived from a four-word phrase: "if it pleases you." The phrase then shortened to "if you please," and then "please you." The current usage of the word "please" presumes that an action will be taken. In other words, it doesn't always ring with humility. To some, it indicates entitlement. To the modern listener, "please" can sound more like a curt demand rather than a hopeful request. For adults raised in households where etiquette was tantamount, dropping "please" from our vocabulary might be a horrifying thought. That's me. I would have been beaten severely if I didn't say. But for parents and caring adults, it's worth recognizing that "please," whether used verbally or in text form, may be seen as a sharper weapon than the diluted "I'd hope you could" or "would you mind," both of which better reflect the original intention of the "if it pleases you" phrasing. If your teen recoils when you use the phrase, it might not be about what you're saying as much as it is about what they're hearing. So, interesting take as words shift in their meaning. A lot of times, what we wish was being heard from us isn't what's being heard, and we have to think intentionally about this. How might this and things like this might be particularly important in the Christian context?
I mean, it's just going to limit your kids' exposure to people from different backgrounds, different faiths, different. Just different economic sense, just by extending your shelter, and then just you, I think you really, eventually, I think you're gonna lose that resiliency. Like, most of us when I grew up, like you came into contact with it, and you had to deal with it,
Mm.
for worse, and you kind of develop that emotional intelligence of this person's kids, someone I want to hang out with, or someone's not.
Mm.
I think just when you lack that, you really inhibit some of those skill type of skills.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. How else might particularly vocabulary be important?
Yeah, I think, well, kind of like you said, when you think you're saying something to somebody, but that's not what they're hearing. It's
Yeah.
a different language almost. It's like something you're used to saying is translated and means a totally different thing to what they would hear.
Yeah,
You know.
Yeah, so I've heard like, yes ma'am,
Yeah.
yes sir, and people being, like older people or even younger people being offended by that, like,
Mhm.
don't call me ma'am.
Yeah.
Don't call me sir, that's disrespectful.
yeah,
And you're like, I meant respect by it.
yeah, yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, just sorry. Yeah, I remember that when I was a kid. Of course, it was very firm. My parents were very firm on that. You say yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. And I said yes, ma'am to somebody. They said, I'm not your ma'am. And it was like, what? So, yeah, that's right. Well, I mean, even I've been thinking about a lot of this recently. It's think about from a gospel presentation perspective. And this, as a guy I've been reading a lot recently, I really like, I've mentioned this, we're developing a new evangelism tool with Crossings. This guy, Sam Chan, and he talks about a jargon-free gospel. And you just think about even our Christianese, how many of our words we've ascribed meaning to that in the larger context of the culture don't have the same meaning. And even if a word like please can have kind of different connotations. What about redemption? One of Sam Chan's points is that the word redeemed has such a different connotation now than even what we understand this kind of this pregnant gospel phrase, and we ascribe all this rich meaning to it, which is accurate and good. But in the world in which we live today, it doesn't carry the same weight and meaning. But I certainly think from a gospel perspective, we ought to think intentionally about how we can communicate the gospel in a way that's true to the meaning, what the gospel is, but in a way that relates to people. And the concept of sin gets harder and harder to communicate. I think even Sam Chan, if you look at his stuff, he has some helpful ways to communicate the concept of sin, even without using the word sin, which I understand a lot of people, you say this, you're not going to talk about sin. No, we're going to communicate the concept of sin, but I don't feel it's necessary to use the word sin. And I would say Jesus even modeled this in his articulation in parables. He could show people's wrongdoing, how they transgressed, without using the word sin or transgression or things like that. So I do think it's helpful for us to consider how we're heard. Anyway, those are a couple things I wanted to discuss. And again, I recommend that Culture Translator email to you. If you weren't here last week, access.org, Culture Translator. They have a podcast too. It's great. All right, so we're going to go to our next practice for developing resilient disciples. Again, we'll remember we've got this canvas of discipleship that we think about. What are the values, the identity, the skills that we want to have, develop within people, and it will be helpful for us to articulate what these are, to make sure that as we interact with people and the world around us that we're actually intentionally trying to develop these. We'll even flesh this out a little bit more specifically today. And again, just for a reminder, by way of review, what our goal is a resilient disciple. And again, we're trying to reverse engineer this, if you will. And again, as a reminder, resilient disciple is a Christ follower that attends church regularly and engages with church more than just attending worship services. They trust firmly in the authority of the Bible. They're committed to Jesus personally and affirm that he was crucified and raised from the dead to conquer sin and death, and they express a desire to transform the broader society as an outcome of their faith. So this is the person we're talking about. This is who we want to be. This is who we are going after. And then here are the practices that this study presents as the answer here. Today we're going to be talking about these meaningful relationships. Of all of these, this is probably the one I get most excited about, and see just a world of opportunities in the church, particularly as, of course, here I'm standing up here, I'm just seeing all of you guys, and for a lot of you, I kind of know where you're at in life or where your kids are. Some of you still have kids in the home, some of you don't, but we all have great opportunity to minister to Gen Z. And as you think about relationships, I would encourage you today to think intentionally, strategically in a couple of ways. So we're going to be talking about your relationships to people in Gen Z, and then and what they're looking for. Think outside of just your immediate circle. Think about the people that you want to enlist to be more of a part of your home and more of a part of your kids' lives, or think of some people that you have opportunity with, that you could make yourself available to. As you think just beyond your immediate sphere. I would love for some meaningful stuff to come out of this as a result, for you to identify maybe some Gen Z folks. Maybe you have kids and your friends have kids, and you want to share influence towards each other's kids, right? That you would say, hey, we're going to need backup in these things in days to come. So anyway, just hopefully the Lord will speak to you, and I'd ask you to act on it. So the question for these meaningful relationships is, people are experiencing loneliness. Their big question is, am I loved? So for meaningful relationships, we would say meaningful relationships means being devoted to fellow believers we want to be around and become. Right, so there's a lot here. We're devoted to them. These people are fellow believers, and they're people that we want to be around and that we want to be like. Right? These are meaningful relationships. Now, this is a world in which we have a lot of friends, a lot of relationships. I use the friends in air quotes because that's literally what they're called on Facebook. But how many of those people would you consider a friend? How many of those people would you call if, something goes bad in your life? Maybe that's how, you would define a friend. But these are meaningful relationships we're devoted to. So this is kind of throw all this up here at once, but Gen Z has a deep need for these meaningful relationships. Because what are the norms for today? Well, it's isolation and mistrust. Adults are twice as likely to say they are lonely as compared to a decade ago. This is a fascinating statistic to me because, in a hyper-connected world, when, just think of how much of your time is spent communicating with other people, right? How much of your time is spent reading what other people are saying, likes, or even expressing anger, online. But the general consensus is we're more lonely than we've ever been. We're more connected and yet more lonely. And we've talked about just the insidious way that social media has presented itself. It gives the illusion of connectedness, but really it results in being lonely. This is a fascinating thing on when somebody, Gen Z, at least, I would say it probably expands to more than this, but at least Gen Z, when they post something on Instagram, particularly something that goes on their grid. Now, just for the uninitiated, something that goes on your grid feels a lot more permanent than one of those fleeting things like a story, right? So you've got your story is there for 24 hours and it just goes away. But something that's on your grid, this lives for a long time, right? You put that on your grid, so then when somebody goes to your profile, they see all of your pictures on your grid. And what you feel like your grid is, this is a representation of my life. If you were to glance at this, what they hope is that you get a general sense of who I am. So when somebody in Gen Z posts something on Instagram, if they don't get the likes, if they don't get the amount of likes, they were asked, how does this make you feel? Right? If they say, all right, they look at their friends, everybody's averaging how many ever 100 likes or interactions with this, people commenting on it saying, you look beautiful, or this is awesome, or whatever it is. If they don't get what they expected, what is a word that you think they would use to describe that? What's that? Depressed. Unfulfilled. These are all things I think they would feel. The word that they use more than any other word to describe this is invisible. I feel invisible. So again, here's this thing. They put this out for people to interact with, and a lot of times, if it doesn't get the traction that they think they would, what do you think they do? Delete it, right? People didn't. I put this out there. It didn't get the interactions I thought it would. Let me just erase this from the world. People didn't like that. So, yeah, they don't like this part of me. They reject this part of me. This must not be good. So now imagine they put up something that's less like who they are, but more interacted with. Then what does that tell them? Do more of that stuff. Yeah, you.
Okay, I would just even say my kids would think that they're being hated on if they didn't,
Yeah.
not just invisible, but like the complete,
Not just a passive thing, but like this is a active aggression against me. Yeah, because you didn't like this, or yeah, it's like, or somebody say, oh, I saw that you went so and so. It's like, oh, you saw that and you didn't like it, interesting,
Instagram recently for, if you're a user, you can see, the likes you get, but didn't it recently introduce, to take down your ability to see if other
Yeah, they did. They took away the like count.
Yeah.
So when you looked at something, you didn't see how many likes it got. You would see if you liked something. And yeah, it was fascinating to see the social media world roundly rejected that, which was interesting. They would all articulate, hey, this is causing problems in my life. This has caused me to feel anxious. These are bad. And then they say, okay, we'll take that away. They said, no, please don't do that. But you know what? People influencers. I hate to use that word, but that's true. You know what the influencers called those likes? They said that's currency to us. Which was an interesting thought. Yeah, they said that's currency, which was an interesting choice of words. But it does equal real dollars for them. It does convert into actual monetary value. But I also think, it's like, yeah, how do you know how valued you are at your work? How much they pay you? Maybe it's if they pay you as much as they can, maybe you're not getting rich, but hey man, I'm getting more than anybody else, right? Or whatever it is. This is real currency to them. But yeah, it ultimately results not in increased connection, but increased loneliness. So digital interaction is preferred, and they avoid the hard work of being a human. How might personal interaction help us? People skills. Yeah.
soft skills that, I used to work in educational workforce with the state, and every employer you talk to talks about soft skills and
Yeah.
how critical that is in the work world, and how more and more the upcoming generation doesn't have that.
Right.
They can't develop that in the current environments that they're in.
Yeah.
You can't have a relationship with someone unless you can speak to them face to face. And so interesting. Like boys. I was at boys' college last semester.
Mm-hmm.
Boys people are different. They are.
Yeah.
It's a very, they're a lot of solid, godly people. But like, even just communication. Like there was this one person who I don't let like people I've never met face to face follow me. That's
Mm.
just my like. Unless I've shake your hand, then you don't need to know about my life. That's a little weird.
Mm.
And this person, they were just standing there. We were kind of in a room. I introduced myself. Finally, it was kind of weird. She had tried to follow me like 4 times, and I declined because I didn't know her, not out of to be rude or anything. And she was like, "What's your name again?" I was like, "Oh, I'm so." And we introduced. It was fine, but it was just so strange to me
Mm-hmm.
that like not only did she knew who I was. Not only did she not initiate, but when like she kept trying to follow. It was just strange. It was
Mm-hmm.
very strange, and that's happened several times where there'll be people who I've met maybe even once, and we're just standing there waiting in line for something, and it's like quiet, and they're like these two guy friends of mine last semester, and it's quiet, and so I was like, okay, I'm gonna count to 10, and if they don't say anything, then I'm gonna say, hi, how are you? You know, and I
Yeah.
and it was so bizarre because people will just kind of pull up front, or they do not interact.
Yeah.
But
Well, there's.
you know, you see like very personal things about their life on their Instagram or
Yeah.
their story, and it's just bizarre.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you just think about what takes place. You know, if you're human, you've probably written an email you shouldn't send, right? And maybe you went ahead and sent it, and maybe you didn't. But you know, you just think about that. Having to say those things face to face, right? Because yeah, what do you fear? If it's you're in person, that person they have the opportunity to respond. You know, if you're gonna unload all this stuff in person, then what happens? They get to instant fact check. You know, that's not what happened, or that's not what I said, or I'm sorry, I did not mean that way. You know, whatever it is, it's like. You know, really, honestly, for my personality, it's like I want to be sharing a thing because I want to be reading your facial expressions to know, do I need to adjust my message? Do I need to back off of this thing? Am I seeing that you're kind of inclined to listen to me more? I need to hammer down on this, and so okay, I feel like they're with me here. Do I just put the pedal to the metal now on this? You know, so there's all these nuances of communication that's happened when you're face to face. And to know there's going to be instant consequences, good or bad, based on how I interact with this person. Well, frankly, I understand wanting to retreat to digital spaces for these things, but is it healthy? Is it right? Is it good? It's not. And I think we need to help. Again, help. Yeah.
I'll wade into deep controversy and talk basketball, but I think it's a fascinating case study watching Cal talk about the players at the NCAA tournament. I had to make them put their phones down and eat dinner together.
Yeah.
And dealing with the assault of the media on them as they're at the tournament, like, no, just experience this.
Yeah.
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 How is that going to play out? Like, I think the obvious situation to think about is how is it going to play out in professional relationships in the workplace, but in marriages. So you're living behind your phone. How are you going to make a relationship work, and how are you going to interact with your spouse in your marriage if you end up getting married? If you don't know how to communicate, and if you do communicate, just like immediately feeling isolated if your spouse calls you out on something.
Yeah.
Asks you to do
I think it's cute. You think people will keep getting married. You know, yeah, that's a pretty dark take on that. But well, I mean, yeah, you think about it. It's like from a secular perspective, why would you? You know, why would you? It's like, yeah, you've got this person. You know, I thought I was a pretty good guy, and then I got married. And I realized I was an awful selfish human being, you know? And then you think you sort out most of your stuff, then you have kids. And you realize, well, I was exponentially even more selfish than I first thought that I fixed, you know? Yeah, it's a great challenge. but yeah, you get this negative feedback, and we'll talk about this a little bit more. I mean, yeah, you need that. In this in the book, this is a phrase they use that's really stuck with me. It's soul crafting to be in these human face-to-face relationships. And particularly, you think about the deepest and best relationships that you have are the ones where you've had conflict. You know, where somebody that you love and is close to has said to you, "What the heck?" You know, or "Why? How dare you?" Or it's you've fought, and then you come back and you say, "Hey, I'm sorry." You know, that's the soul crafting work of relationships that you need. Yeah, and if we eliminate that, one, I can't imagine a scenario do you get to the point where you say, "Yeah, let's get married." Yeah, we shall see. This is a great question. And we've alluded to this. We'd rather present a version of ourselves rather than show our real self. And you think about the anxiety that it would produce, and I use that word anxiety in a loose sense now. If you've presented this person online, and then you have to think about actually meeting people, and then realizing that you're kind of boring, you know, it's debilitating for me. No, I'm kidding. You know, but that is the thing. You spend all this time curating this image, and then it's like, and your assumption is that everybody else is this way, that I'm faking this. They are really that, and now we're going to meet, and they'll see the real me. It's a challenge, but our highly curated worlds lead to a me-centered view of reality, and that goes back to what you're saying. It's just like, if I can take everything that comes to me, all of my relationships are based on algorithms and people that agree with what I'm saying, that like what I'm saying, we like the same things, and then you have to make real relationships work. It's a great challenge. So all of now we're talking about isolation. Now we'll talk a little bit about mistrust. Gen Z has an evolving relationship with authority. You know, one of the examples I've used before, you think about if you are in trouble in the 1960s, well, maybe let's use 70s, you know, and something happens, you would be looking for a person in uniform, most likely. The majority of people would be looking for somebody in uniform. Now, if somebody in uniform approaches you, or the average person in the metropolitan area, what happens? You get out your phone and start recording them, because they're most likely going to do something bad to you, or say something they shouldn't say, or offend you in some way. You have some opportunity. Just there's been a massive shift in the way that Gen Z views authority. How are people in authority seen? So, you know, here's one of the things that they found, Barna found in their studies, and Pew has seen other things, but they tend to view their youth pastor as being paid to be their friend. You think about some of the evangelistic method of years ago. It was like Bring a Friend Sunday, or Pack the Pew, which has been comically pointed out as like, oh, why did you even have a pew that you were trying to fill anyway? It's like, maybe that's a problem. This was my pew that you were trying to pack. But this would be an evangelistic method that we would say, hey, you come here to church. There's this guy that knows what he's talking about. Come on and listen to him tell you about Jesus. Right now, if you were to bring somebody to church, so now you bring them up, you put them in front of this person that's in authority, they're predisposed not to trust, but to distrust that person. This is why, you know, you've got to evaluate your own, how you think about evangelism in your own world. If you've got people around you, and your big goal is to get them to church, maybe that shouldn't be your goal. Now, it's ultimately, I'm not saying people shouldn't end up in church. That's probably not your step one. That used to be step one. That's probably like step 17 now. get them to church. Because certainly for Gen Z, they think, oh, well, this guy, he's paid to do this. That's their view. But boomers tend to be more critical of Gen Z than the reverse. When boomers were asked about Gen Z and millennials, nearly 0% of boomers described Gen Z and millennials as hospitable and generous. So when boomers were asked about how they thought about millennials, nearly 0% said they were hospitable and generous. When you asked millennials and Gen Z about boomers, they were magnanimous in their praise of boomers in those two areas. That was fascinating to me. Now, last week or a couple weeks ago, I talked about how Gen Z is probably most inclined to listen to boomers. They're inclined to hear them, particularly when they have a relationship with them. We are talking about authority. If they have authority, they reject that kind of in a wholesale fashion. But part of the problem is the way that they are viewed. And somebody, I'm not to beat up on the boomers, but just as an example, I mean, maybe some of this isn't happening because of their overcritical nature in which they view this generation. And it's shaping the way they see it, because ultimately you start to get a sense that this person thinks I'm just an entitled little jerk. I'm probably not going to spend a lot of time with you. Yeah.
Why is it overcritical? Like comparatively to other generations where they're, I mean, I don't think making bad decisions, whatever, but why is it?
So say that in a different way. No, I just want to understand your question better.
Why are the boomers more critical of Gen Z than other generations?
Ask them. I don't know. Yeah.
Like what created that?
I think there's some specific things that fly in the face of how a boomer was raised. There's some specific ways that somebody of Gen Z was the things that they do, their norms that fly specifically in the face of, again.
Their lack of people skills, like to be a boomer and have somebody that cannot look you in the eye and have a
Yeah.
conversation, you're like, what planet are you?
Yeah, it's offensive.
It just seems rude.
Yeah, it feels offensive. It's like, man, you can't articulate this clearly to me. You can't express this. You just assume entitlement, which again, it's not. I'm not saying any of this stuff is inaccurate.
Like that's the way, like I think boomers look at it is
Yeah.
contact, that's respectful.
Yeah.
And whenever you can't look at me, that means you don't care about what I'm saying.
That's right.
So I'm not gonna give you, you just completely shut down to them.
Yeah, and don't hear me saying we shouldn't be helping them to make eye contact. We should, right? But I think there is a scenario in which going, hey, well, this isn't something you've had to do. Let's not expect you to be at level 10 right now when there's nothing that's brought you to level 10. Let's understand you're at level 2. Let's, through our relationship and time, let's move you along this line here. Yeah.
I do think that the older we get, the more we tend to glorify the past and like view ourselves in a better light than we
Yeah.
actually were. So I do think, boomers are getting older, and then the older you get, the more it's like back in my day.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. So
Yeah.
I think that there's a little bit of a, I don't know,
Yeah.
bias there too.
Yeah, that was in that very first outline. Again, I think JP shared that there's this quote that was like the worst generation ever was my grandparents' generation, and it was like a guy in 542 BC said that, and that was like a real thing, and that's just kind of the way that we see it. It's like if they were just like me, they'd have all this sorted out. And there's some truth to that, whoever it is, yeah.
Just a quick question on, because I've seen this a lot, do you think they're meshing Gen Xers in with boomers when they're saying boomers? Because I've seen a lot of social media posts about people that are saying, I'm not a baby boomer.
Right.
I'm a Gen Xer.
Uh-huh.
But you see little memes and skits, and
Yeah.
I just, for clarification.
Absolutely.
You think they're?
Well, not in this study, they're not. I do think people at large do that.
Okay.
I don't.
Who's not a Gen Zer is a boomer?
Well, yeah. So that okay? You talk about something that Gen Z does. Yeah, Gen Z is basically, you think like me or you're a boomer. You know, what it's like. Yeah, that's accurate. That the culture at large does that, but Barna is not doing it. I can assure you, Barna is not doing it. But yeah, these are great comments. And then, humor and media are conditioning us to show less confidence in authority. Again, I just go to the whole reason, or let's just say what Elon Musk is emphasizing about the existence of Twitter. This is what's he call it? Citizen journalism, right? Citizen journalism is what he's calling it, and that's kind of how he's trying to frame this right now and show that you need this in your life because you can't trust media. And again, and I don't completely disagree with that, but that's just one symptom. You can find this like, okay, maybe this is healthy in this one thing. Well, but what citizen journalist should you listen to? You know what I mean? It's like, well, this person has not thought about this stuff, has not gone to school for this thing. Let's listen to that. Now, and I will say, our ability to meaningfully take this information in it is not good. I saw was when we were in North Carolina. Was that last week? There was somebody that posted a video of Andy Stanley saying some crazy stuff, right? Shocker, right? Just another week. And everybody was going nuts on him, right? And everybody loves to dunk on Andy Stanley. Fine, go for it. But this clip that they showed was 4 years old. It was 4 years old. But everybody spent all this time dunking on this guy and saying all this crazy stuff, talking about how bad he is. And it was like, hey, we did this 4 years ago. You know, it was like already been dealt with. But everybody that saw this was like, I can't believe he's still saying this stuff. And it was like, we don't even, if like you just follow the link, gone to YouTube and saw that this happened in 2019, so again, we see things and our assumption is this is new. I've not heard this before. So it's like, man, anyway, it's one way we're being conditioned to not trust authority. What do you think is probably the most popular show of all time? Well, there's a case to be made for that. What's the most popular show right now? The Office. The Office. Okay. Oh, yeah. So I've not watched The Office, so I can't speak intelligently about it, but I know enough about it to say this. The main guy on there, the boss. Tell me about him.
I would never want him to be my boss.
He's awful.
He's cringeworthy.
He's the ultimate cringe factor, secondhand embarrassment, just an awful guy. Now, okay. Listen to her justify him. Yeah. There's a lot of these things. You take this and some of the words that, if you look into this, some of the words associated with this, they're weaponizing humor. Again, you go back to Twitter. I mean, they're taking snark to the next level. But in so many of these things, they're using humor, but they're causing us to mistrust authority. You just name, in the past 15, maybe 20 years, name a dad on a show that's like somebody you want to be like. On a good show. No, a show that people watched. No. Yeah. This Is Us? Okay. Survivor? No. Doesn't any Survivor? Uh-huh. Okay. Okay, good. Yeah. All right, but they would say it's a pretty short list, right? And we have to go back to Seventh Heaven. It's like, yeah. But anyway, these are certainly some things. It's affecting how people see authority. we're assuming that if you're this, you're a goofball. You know, you don't really know. Maybe you're good-hearted, but I'm still, you know, have major struggles with this. Here,
There's definitely a decline in the student's response to your authority.
mm,
It's very disrespectful across the board, in general. Like, there are still some students who are respectful, but I definitely see that as a teacher.
oh, I can't imagine. I this
In the
yeah
years that I've been teaching, I've been
yeah
teaching.
seen a shift.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Seth, I mean, I would describe myself as pretty authoritarian in even the way that I relate to my kids a lot of times. Carrie and I came from a military background. I always had a high level of trust in our government and the military. And now Carrie and I are both in lockstep in that if our kids came to us and said, we want to go to the Naval Academy like you did, they would have to convince the heck out of me
Mm,
for me to even sign off on that.
yeah. Wow.
I no longer trust the same structures that I came up in as a young professional
Right.
military officer.
Right.
And so there is institutional distrust, but a lot of it is warranted.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's all misplaced. Yes, yeah. I mean, so much of it is now it's going away. It's going so far away from our Christian beliefs. Some of it is right. I'm not saying it's wrong to question all this. I am saying it's not easy to keep it, isolated to this one area, and ask a 14-year-old to navigate that in a meaningful way is really challenging. But
the same thing you're saying about how the generations say, well, in my generation, that's the same with the military. We saw it whenever we were young, officers, the chiefs that were nearing their 20-year point, like, it's not the same Navy, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
Now we're seeing our classmates saying the same thing, like, I'm just trying to hold on another year and a half and I can
Wow.
retire, because it's not the same, they've gone so far. So just really seeing that
Mhm.
shift through the military standpoint is
Yeah.
very obvious.
yeah, that's interesting. Interesting.
When my sons were in school, they're 10 and 12 years older than our daughter. And we taught them, you respect authority, you don't, for the most part, don't question. Um, and so we had very little tolerance for better not hear anything happen at school or that we're rude to anybody. And now we have the weird balance of telling our daughter, we want you to be kind, we want you to be respectful, but you need to tell me if your teacher is saying crazy woke ideology in class. And I think because particularly my anxiety over this whole what's going on in the world, it's like I want to know what you're being taught, because there has been some really horrible, weird, off-the-wall things already said at school that I've already had to address with administrators, and it's hard to navigate as a parent when you're afraid because of stuff that's truly happening
Yeah.
in the world. But it's just been a major change even from when the boys were kids
Yeah.
10 years later.
Well, and what you're describing is there's a challenge now. It's like, don't just accept everything they say, but you got to do what they say, and because, well, for the teacher, from a teacher's perspective, it's like it used to hold some weight that was like, don't make me tell your parents. And now it's like, I wish you'd talk to my parents, because they're going to take my side, the student side, no matter what it is. And that's a great challenge, and teachers are having to navigate this in both directions. Anyway, we spend plenty of time on that. Well, let's look more to what we would hope to accomplish. Again, so much of this, what Gen Z needs, is what we've all needed, and that's relationship with Christ, experiencing Him, relationships in the church, reading our Bible. So if church provides an answer, or our Christian community provides an answer to exactly what it is that they need, what we're looking for. Again, these resilient disciples, they found church to be a place where they felt like they belonged. Almost twice as much as just the habitual churchgoers. So they feel like these are my people. There's someone in my life who encourages me to grow spiritually. So again, you're thinking about this from your own perspective, wherever you are, if you don't have kids in your home, have you encouraged somebody that is Gen Z to grow in their faith? Or do you have mechanisms where you're encouraging a young person to grow in their faith? So it'd be easy for us to hear, well, I wish Gen Z would do this or do this. Well, get involved in their lives, right? Encourage them to do this thing. Help them to feel this. If you're a parent, you've got young kids, are you putting them in the orbit of other seasoned Christians? Are you encouraging them to do this stuff, right? The third one down, I'm connected to a community of Christians, so they feel like this is their community. When growing up, I had close personal friends who were adults from my church, parish, or faith community. So you see close friends that were adults. What a meaningful thing that is, and how the effect that has. I'm just curious, who would say they had, when you were in church growing up, you felt like you had a friend that was an adult, somebody that you could?
Aside from a youth pastor?
Yeah, no?
I have one I refer to as my second dad.
Mm.
My dad didn't go to church.
Oh, wow.
This was the guy.
At church.
I was like, you're my church dad.
My church, yeah. Wow. Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. Were you trying to say something?
I'm curious, people raising their hands, like, how, I feel like most of it's women. Like, I don't think men, I mean, even in my circles, like, I would implore anyone just from as a Gen Z or with Gen Z friends, like, please seek them out, grab them. I
Yeah.
have friends who have dropped off because people did not grab them or seek them out and pursue them. And I'm so thankful that my family has emphasized the importance of discipleship and told me, you go seek it out. If it's not coming to you, you go find it.
Yeah.
And the people who don't have that, they want, especially men, especially boys,
Mm-hmm.
and especially in our culture right now,
Yeah.
men crisis. And
Yeah.
I think that especially godly men, like, grab them.
Yeah.
Even if they're not in church, I mean, like you said, it's going to take steps to get there, but just seek them out.
Yeah.
And I think even like raising our hands, even historically, like that's, in my experience, that's not something you see.
Mm-hmm.
Especially with guys.
Yeah.
I know a lot of guys in my friend groups and stuff, they've just struggled to have a godly man disciple them or find someone who wants to or can commit to it.
Yeah.
Or values that. So,
Well,
And then from a different standpoint, I would say, like, as a parent of a Gen Zer, I think it would be easy to think, like, my child trusts someone else more than me, and I'm the parent. But trust that that person is having a good influence. So,
Yeah.
like, personally, I didn't start growing in my faith until I was being discipled by an older woman when I was in college. And I wouldn't want my mom to think that she failed. I would just want her to be supportive of that relationship,
Yeah.
I guess.
Well, that's a great encouragement, because as a parent, it's like, man, it's hard. I wish my kid would hear this from me,
Yeah.
But sometimes they just don't.
And in actuality, yeah, I mean, I have relationships with girls in the youth group that have come to me with things that they haven't told their parents.
Yeah.
And that's not bad.
Right.
They're
Well, that's the beauty of the church, because what typically will happen then is they're going to go to you, and maybe they're going, let me check the veracity of what my parents have said, and it's like, this is what my mom is saying, and then they go to you and they say, now what do you think I ought to do? And then if you say the same thing, I mean, that's what's glorious. And to me, it's like, to hear, I'm saying stuff, I know my kids come here, they hearing the same thing that I'm saying, Wednesday nights in their D group, or whatever it is. This is just a glorious thing. And I just think about myself when there was a time I was far from God. My dad pulled out all the stops and he basically enlisted the help of anybody and everybody. And that's what I would say was the thing. There was no silver bullet for my change of heart. It was just a constant pressure from everybody I knew and loved to say, come on, man, this is bad for you. Just look around. I've one of the stories I tell, Dr. Moeller called me one day and said, hey, you want to drive me? I'm going to go preach somewhere. Will you drive me there? And I said, yeah, sure. I was a student at Boyce. I show up and take him there. And he proceeded to, for like an hour and a half, try and convince me to break up with Candace. Now, here's the deal.
On tomorrow's briefing.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what? She wasn't a believer at the time. And I was too dumb to listen to him. And she dumped me. She dumped me, as she should have. And then the very short story, which if you want to hear it sometime, I'd love to tell you. That's when my dad shared the gospel with her. That's how she came to faith in Christ. 3 years later, is when we talk again. We didn't speak for 3 years. We get back together. We get married. But there's a great story in there. But for me, when I was far from God, it was my parents just saying, I felt like everybody was being thrown at me. And that was the most beautiful thing. Or at the time, it was painful, so I felt like everybody knew all my garbage. But it was like, man, that's what our churches, we ought to have our kids ought to have these types of relationships that you're enlisting this person. Go get them. Maybe they'll listen to you. Yeah, Sherry?
I was just gonna say, that is the beauty of like our children's ministry and our youth ministry.
Yeah.
They come in alongside you. Even if you're doing a great job in your home or you're trying your best, I will never forget like when our boys started going to youth and they would come home and, do you know what Zach said? And they would do the scripture. And I remember Dawn and I was just like, literally that was our Bible study 2 days ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was like, it's just having someone else. I think it just solidifies it. So it's just not my parents who were.
Yeah, that's right.
But this is universally, like, this is good doctrine, and now, even though at the time that's kind of hurtful, like, do you not even see, like, what we're trying to do in our home?
Yeah.
It just feels a little bit like, but we were thankful, like.
Yeah, I hear you.
We were getting it, but now, as our older boys are grown, and they have their own ministries, like, now they look back, and they're so thankful that
Yes.
they did Bible study every single day.
Yeah,
They're
right.
thankful for this church and for the youth ministers and whatever, but like, they now come back and say, we are so thankful that you did these things and that you talked to us about these things in our home. But absolutely, people who came alongside, and sometimes it's just that they're younger and cooler and they
Yeah.
see someone, who seems more their age, who's also doing it and living it.
Yeah.
Like, that makes a big difference.
Yeah. Well, a couple weeks ago, I talked about the plausibility structures. Your inclination to believe something to be true based on who's surrounding you. And it's like, and I can't imagine right now being a teenager and going to school and holding these beliefs that basically everybody around you is like, dude, you're believing this stuff about aliens, basically, right? So then find yourself in a gospel community where you're looking at all these people that are living good, successful lives, that are committed to the Lord, and that helps the student be able to go, okay, I can do this. I just think, of course, I work at camp, and the power of camp is unique because what happens there is like you go in and you're seeing this room, there's 800 people in here, and they're all singing this stuff, and you can see the people around you that have been transformed by this, and you're going, maybe there's something to this. Maybe it's not akin to believing in aliens. Maybe this really is changing these people's lives. Anyway, well, let's press on so we can get you guys out of here in time. The need for God-honoring community would be these two things, aspirational and reality-based, right? So it's aspirational in the sense that we know this is in Christian community is the best example of what God can do with human community. We come to church, this is the ideal. And I'm telling you, again, I was talking to Will this week, and I was just like, we were talking about this class, and I said, man, I hope none of this is like a subtweet, like, well, I wish our ministry is doing so much of this stuff, which you guys have already identified. And we have such wonderful people doing incredible stuff, investing in the lives of our people. And you come here, our C groups, it's a beautiful thing. This scripture, 1 Thessalonians 5:14, we urge you, brothers, admonish the idle, encourage the faint-hearted, help the weak, be patient with them all. That's what I see here week in and week out. And in our gospel communities, this is a beautiful thing. So it's aspirational, but it's reality-based. An earthly, everyday understanding of Christian relationships. And that means it's hard sometimes. Dietrich Bonhoeffer said in his book, Life Together, we don't merely bear one another's burdens. The true burden is bearing one another. The hardest part of relationships are the people. But man, that's the beauty of it. We identify the problems. You hyper-curate all of your life into these areas, and you don't have that soul-crafting work of relationships where you say something you shouldn't have said, where you get too passionate about something. You drop a bomb that's hurtful to people, or you're sitting in your bed or whatever, and you're thinking about, oh my gosh, I said that, and I saw the look on their face. They didn't say anything to me, but I know I shouldn't have said that. I've had too many of those times. That's like I go off on something, and it's like, man, I was too overzealous and just wrong. The greatness of Christian community is the tension that it's incredible, it's life-giving, and it's incredibly challenging. It's both of these things, and that's sanctifying. The process of sanctification is painful, and when we try and remove the pain from these relationships, you miss out. You miss out on the good part of it. If it's not changing you, if you're shaping everything to be more like you, and you're not being shaped to ultimately look like somebody else, you're not a part of Christian community. And there are incredible opportunities for that here, and we have to do that. Relationships are meaningful when we're devoted to fellow believers we want to be around and become. So here are some quick encouragements for you. Participate in the lives of others. We've said we think this is meaningful and good. Here's some ideas. Go to somebody else's ball game that you're not related to. Find a kid, somebody's family that you are involved with. Be there for this kind of stuff. Again, we will need each other, reinforcing the things that we're saying. Have people in your home. Host a cooking class. Here's one. This might sound odd. Host interviews. I read an article in the Atlantic. It was from this lady, a review of this lady's book, Elizabeth Keating. It was called The Essential Questions. Interview your family to uncover stories and bridge generations. I want to read a quick excerpt from this. The essential questions, they include, so she covers 13 topics. They include basic background information, such as where someone was born, as well as more abstract inquiries, such as how someone conceives of their identity, what they believe in, and what they've noticed about the passage of time. That's interesting. Specificity is key. So after asking a relative about the home they grow up in, follow up with requests for details. What did your windows look out onto? What did you hear when you woke up in the morning? When you ask for descriptions of an elder's childhood home in the neighborhood they roamed around, you'll hear stories that place you in a rich sensory world you knew little about. So ask what family dinners were like and what your relatives were taught about expressing emotion. Ask about their worst first dates and where they bought their clothes. And remember that the most important questions can also be the plainest. One of my favorites is just, what do you wish people knew about you? Again, this is 100% secular. This was an article in the Atlantic. But I thought, what a beautiful thing. What if you identified some seasoned saint in the church, you brought them into your home, and you asked them these questions in front of your kids, your teenagers. You said, hey, let's let's get some time with so-and-so, and you had them prepared to ask questions. One of the great joys and gifts and privileges of my childhood were the people that we got to have in our home. When I was a kid, it used to be when you'd have a preacher come and preach, that a lot of times they'd stay at your house, So I've had guys like W.A. Criswell in our house, preachers, missionaries from all over. And the conversations that I just got to listen to, I'll never forget. And we've become so busy and isolated, we're moving from one thing to the next. I think we miss out on just having people in our house and to let our kids listen to our conversations with other faithful people. We ought to be in each other's homes more. We ought to be part of each other's lives more. So I love this idea of hosting an interview, even if it's informal, even if hey, we're just going to have dinner, but I've got a list of questions that I want to ask this person. I think that's an incredible thing. And then serving together, not to blaze past that one, but we have great opportunities for that here. And then be around the people that you want to be like. Have your kids be around the people that you want them to be like. It might sound odd, when we go to hire our interns, the people that stay for an extended period of time in crossings, I just ask them, in some shape or form, do you want to be like me and work like me? As if not, this is not going to go well. My assumption is that you're going to be inclined to listen to what I have to say and how I would teach you to do things. And you either need to think that I'm at least a decent husband and dad or an effective worker or whatever. So for you to be a part of this is to say that you want to do these things. And at least at some level they say, yeah. Now there might be a point where they're going, I can't believe I did this. But it's like, this is helpful. Hey, let's just be honest here. Do you feel like I have something to contribute to your life? And a lot of times you meet with somebody, you just ask them that question. Do you feel like I have something to contribute to your life? You at least get them on the record to say, yeah. So then when they're disagreeing with you, well, you said that you think that I have something good, right? And that you want to do these things. So to accomplish this, here's a way that you could do it. And then be intentional about the desired outcomes. Well, there's what you want to set your kids up to do, what you want to do in a relationship with somebody. Here are the outcomes that we would want to be so, right? I'm confident in my relationships. I feel connected. I'm mentored by somebody older than me. I'm participating in mentoring somebody else. Here's a good one. I know how to appropriately use digital tools to grow my relationships. We do have great opportunities for staying connected to people, but we ought to be leveraging them intentionally to grow our relationships. And then lastly, I know how to avoid digital tools when they inhibit my relationships. So when you sense that this thing is keeping you from real relationships, then do you know when to set it down? When you're in a scenario and you look around, you say everybody's on their phones, you say, I need to put this down. This is keeping us from this. And then we're almost done. Ways to become a relationally transforming community. This is a big one. Model vulnerability. Again, they're looking at a world where they feel like everybody's got it together. They look around and they feel like these people don't struggle with what I struggle with. These people don't have the problems that I have. In a lot of Gen Z, they're ready to share some stuff. And when you go to your community group and the only prayer request that you can come up with is that your third cousin twice removed has a dog that hurt its leg, and you're expressing to them that that's your biggest problem, they think, I'm too screwed up for these people. If in our communities, in our gospel communities, we don't feel like we can be vulnerable with these people, we're giving them the impression your problems are so much worse than my problems. Where we remain so surface level in some of these communities that it's off-putting to them, and they feel like if I was to drop a bomb in here about what I really went through and did this week, they would be looking at me like a horse at a new gate, right? So, and sometimes I'm not saying you share your deepest, darkest secrets, but you might get in your community group this week, and say, I'm not good at doing my Bible study every day. I just didn't want to read the Bible this week. Or I had some failure of some sort. Or, man, my past sin has crept into my mind all week. I go back and forth between wanting to go back to it and even thinking it was bad. And I need y'all to pray for me. What would vulnerability look like in your communities that would communicate to the young people in your group? Maybe I'm not as messed up as I thought I was. Maybe I'm not as isolated as I thought I was. The next one is take some digital Sabbaths. It's a healthy tool. I talked about that book, The Common Rule, that I still commend to you. Hopefully it's helpful if anybody's read it. That's one of the things that we need some time where we model this for ourselves. Again, we're trying to teach our kids these things. We have some of the same struggles ourselves. And then we honor the right heroes. Who is it that we honor in our homes? Is it the athletes? Is it the politicians? Is it the people that have the hot takes? Or is it the people that have lived a life of faithfulness? Again, I just go back to my experience. The people that were my heroes growing up were those missionaries that sat in our home, were these preachers that came in there and that I got to spend time with. It was the people that I would go and stay with, the people that I was exposed to. I think you'd be shocked at the accessibility of some of these people if you just want to have them in your home, especially if you're trying to tell them, hey, I want people like you to be of great value to my family. Could we have you in our home? I'm not going to read all this to you. If you're interested, I can send these things to you. All this to say, when the resilient people, the people that go out and live and do the stuff, had relationships like these, and we just need to make it a priority in our lives. In the church has a great opportunity. And again, the more I study and think about this, the more I see how just the Lord has been so kind to Buck Run and how he's blessed us in incredible ways with leadership that's doing this. There are opportunities for all of this stuff. Now, it takes us getting involved in them, putting our kids in proximity to these things, looking for opportunities to minister to other kids in this area. This is what's incredible. And I'll say this quickly. I just got one more slide after this when we're done. What I see happen at camp, camp is unique. Because you get these college kids, they move there, and they get to be a part of a high-pressure, gospel-focused community like this. And it is very much that 1 Thessalonians passage where it's like you're going to admonish the idle, you're going to help the weak. You've got people that are coming to you and say, hey, when you did X this week, that really frustrated me. And they have to say, I'm really sorry. And they have to sort that out. And they work that out. And then they go the next week and they say, hey, I'm really struggling this way. Would you pray for me here? And they say, yeah, let's pray right now. And you get this deep gospel community. And what we have to fight against almost more than anything at all is having camp be the best summer of their life. What we're coaching them every single week is say, please don't let this be your best summer ever. This, honestly, this is what church does. What you experience is like normal in a good church. So go do that in a good church. This isn't some anomaly. You don't have to look back at this with such fondness. It's like, you can have this. So just go do it. Go find that. Go be that. Go start that somewhere. And that's an incredible opportunity. And the church is set up in God's infinite goodness and wisdom. It's like this has been so for every generation. It's like all of our biggest problems are satisfied in the gospel and satisfied in what he's provided for us in his people at church. It's great. And this last quote, I thought this is from a guy that's a professor at, I think it's Southwestern. The teenager that looks out over the congregation and says, these are my people, I belong here, is most likely to look up and say, you're my God, and I belong in your presence. And man, what for us to, if we're going to be investing our time and our energy and our kids' time and energy, it ought to be here with these people. But this place is going to be begging for it the least. You know, you don't have all the fees and uniforms and all the things that are going to be vying for all of your time and attention and affection to say, be a part of this thing. This, man, is just the doors are open, and we just got to invest. We got to be available. You know, wherever you are in your stage of life, you're just like, hey, use me how you want to use me.